All right. Whenever you're ready, Micah, you can start.
Good. Our presentation is over racism in the classroom. So what is racism and who's targeted? Racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or is marginalized. This has slowly became such a common thing in our society today, especially based off previous experiences and current events that have happened. And it's the more common it's become, the more we need to educate others about it. So that being said, some other key terms are prejudice, which is the preconceived opinion that is not based on a reason or actual experience. Discrimination is the unjust or I can't say this. Prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. Antagonism is the active hostility or opposition, and marginalize is to regulate to an unimportant or powerless position within a society or group.
So some examples of microaggressions are teachers picking on the Asian kids to answer math questions. There was once where a high school student reported that on her final essay for a course, her teacher said, "This is way too perfect of English for it to be written by you." She was a Hispanic student, and the language she used in this text was very formal and very academic, and her teacher said that it was the way it was written was too formal for it to be written by Hispanic, really. And when it comes to gym sports, in some cases soccer, you have team captains choosing the Hispanics because they are known to be good at soccer. But you also have people who look at the strange white kid and peg them as the school shooter, since it fits the stereotype that's been there for given generations. But these are microaggressions that were surveyed and that we have personally seen within our high school career. So how do microaggressions occur? Microaggressions often come in forms of compliments or jokes. So you could be sitting with your friends and they just simply say a joke that's pretty racist towards you that makes you feel uncomfortable. And when these jokes are thrown, it's more of you have a sense of discomfort, and they could just seem as they were offering praise of being, or they were trying to be funny. And then with the Black students, there's this, for one of our readings, it said with the Black students, it's very hard to be one of the few women in certain classes because sometimes the teacher doubts you because you are the only Black person. So this is saying where you are seen more of as unable to have the ability to be up there on the tier of a great student. So they doubt you constantly and they express that doubt very vividly. It's also being called on in class to offer the student of a particular racial, gender, or perspective. So if you're discussing things on Chicano history, they'll typically call on the Hispanic kid to be like, "Oh, how do you feel about this?" Or in other terms where they're talking about LGBTQ in the class, the teacher will just call on the kid who associates with that, but probably isn't really open about it, and they'll still call on them because they do associate with that. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable enough because they're putting them on the spot. You're also being, on other ways, you're excluded from participating in group projects and experience racial jokes and teasing in the lab.
So the history of microaggressions in school. So as we've said, microaggressions are a form of racism that aren't talked about a lot and aren't things that get mass news coverage. But I think all of us in this class have experienced microaggressions in school at some point, whether we realized it or not at the time. So there isn't an exact timeline to map out the history, but the term was coined in 1970 by a professor named Chester M. Pierce to describe insults he witnessed against African Americans. And while the term was written, or it was created about 50 years ago, behaviors that describe the term have been around for longer. and only more recently studies have been done to document the pervasiveness of microaggressions in schools and how they occur. So a study done by the Research on Immigrants in Community College, or the RICC, in 2012 showed the frequency but also where they occurred. So they conducted their study among 3 community colleges in New York and observed 60 classrooms. And they observed at least one microaggression in 17 of those classrooms, with a total of 51 total. And in these classrooms, 53% of the instructors were white, and 89% of the students were people of color. So one school had a student body of 95% Black and Latino students and 52.9%. So over half the microaggressions in the whole study occurred at one of the 3 schools. And then a different school with 49% Black and Latino students only accounted for 11.8% of the microaggressions. And it's also interesting to note how the frequency of these changed among the different types of classes. So there were general, remedial, and vocational classes observed throughout the study, and the proportion of students that were multicultural remained pretty consistent throughout those. But out of these 60 classrooms, 28.3% were remedials, yet they accounted for 41.2% of all the microaggressions in the study. And 48.3% of the classrooms were general education, but they only accounted for 24.1% of the microaggressions. So there's a glaring consensus throughout the studies that remedial classes and classes that have a higher proportion of Black and Latino and multicultural students account for more of the microaggressions observed throughout the study. And this is because the types of assumptions that these are based on is that someone assumes that someone else is uneducated or unintelligent solely based off racial prejudice. And this is just one study. There's thousands of schools across the country, and these occur each and every day. And more people need to realize some things they say towards students of color, even if they were trying to be funny or make a joke, aren't always interpreted that way.
So what can we do about this? The most important thing that we can do is just to be aware of what we're saying. People hear things way different than what we think we're saying. Like we may think that we're just complimenting them, saying they did a good job, but to them it may sound like we just insulted them and are acting surprised or judging their ability just based off like what they look like. We also have to treat both the symptoms and the disease. Doing nothing is the biggest threat to continue the status quo, because we have to eliminate all the biases that people may say, not stereotyping, just treating everybody as equals because we all have the same ability. We can also attend seminars and discussions, and that's a great way to learn about how microaggressions occur, because you can hear about people's other experiences and how you can learn from those experiences of what to do and what not to do. We can also research common stereotypes so we can help others to avoid saying these hurtful jokes. So just be careful what you're saying. Just boost everyone. Don't put anyone down, and we can all do the same things.
And that's works cited. All right, I'll stop the recording.